digging into the AFC West today, Derek. I wanted to ask you, if you had to give a tagline for this division, what would it be?
Best Coast. If you're going to call me on the West Coast, I'm going to say best coast every time. Come on now. I mean, when you have Pat, technically he's like the furthest east, so it kind of feels weird to classify him as West Coast, but it is the AFC West, so I'm going to claim him.
We have obviously the defending champs, the two-time defending champs in this division. A couple teams very much in transition. I mean, I think the rest of the teams in this division you could qualify as in transition. But this starts with the best team in the NFL, the most relevant team in the NFL, the best player in the NFL. So let's get this kicked off with the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs offseason in 60 seconds. We've done these for all of the teams that we've talked about during these previews. Extension for Chris Jones, who was a free agent. I forgot that even was happening at the beginning of the offseason. 5 years, $160-ish million, $95 million guaranteed. Travis Kelce gets a little bit of a bump. Drew Tranquil, 3 years and $19 million with $12.5 guaranteed after he comes in last year on a one-year deal and played very well for this team. Offseason acquisitions, they retained Michael Dana. They signed Marquise Brown to a one-year, $17 million deal. They traded L'Jarius Sneed to the Titans. Also lost Nick Allegretti, Willie Gay, Mike Edwards in free agency. And in the draft, Xavier Worthy in the first round, Kingsley Suamataia in the second round.
As far as I know, Pat Mahomes is still there, so almost all the other stuff doesn't even matter.
Blue chip check-in for the Kansas City Chiefs. For all of these teams, we're going through how many blue chip players we think are on the roster. What was your answer for Kansas City?
Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, whenever they take him off the pitch count. I don't know if that's going to be in December, if that's going to be in January, but obviously he proved to us at the end of the season he's very much still in that tier, even though we thought he was slowing down for a second. And then
I've said this before, this is the Spurs era of the Chiefs dynasty, where they could just put Tim Duncan on ice for like 80% of the season and then trot him out in May and everything is fine. That's how it feels with Travis Kelce right now.
Yeah, Kelce personifies that idea for them. I think it's perfect.
He's going to be 35 years old this fall. It's a reasonable way to handle him at this part of his career.
Yeah, especially a guy who's always been like eyes running around. He's in space. He's fast. Yeah, let's keep him fresh until the games matter.
So who did you have? This is 3. You landed on 3 total was your number. Okay.
3,
that is also what I had.
And then there were like 3 or 4 players where I was like, maybe I could give it one more year. Maybe they've been there before, but I couldn't get all the way there with it.
Are those 3 players Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, and Trent McDuffie?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, those are
players.
also.
My heart wants to say George Karlaftis. He's probably a half tier below that,
but
I think he's a very good player. He's a very good player.
George Karlaftis is your exact type of guy.
Yes, he is.
Like, it's just like
I'll talk about him later. Don't worry.
It's just all fuck you energy all the time with George Karlaftis. So I'm not surprised to hear that, but I'm not giving him the nod here quite yet. So I think they do have like 3 to 5-ish red chip guys. Trey Smith, I think at his best has been a really nice piece for them. And I think Justin Reed has been really good for this defense. And I think his skill set is fit what they want to be defensively. So I think that him coming in a couple years ago really allowed this transition with Spags to kind of fully take hold. So those are probably all the guys I'd want to mention. But I think 3 true blue chip guys. What significant question marks does this depth chart have in your mind? We've been doing this as kind of a counterbalance to the blue chip conversation.
I mean, it's kind of just how the cornerback room is going to shake out. Like almost every other spot to me, like you could even say some of the offensive line stuff, they played a little bit below their level, but okay, they went out and drafted a left tackle who seems to be an upgrade already. So I think the guys on the interior are probably going to play better than they did last year. So to me, it's kind of just, well, you've got to replace an all-pro corner with a bunch of young guys. Let's see how it shakes out.
Interior defensive line is one thing that I would throw out there. Derek Nottie is still on the PUP list. There's a chance that Mike Pennell, who is, I think, slated to start for them, is just better than Nottie has been over the last year or so. Obviously, Pennell was fantastic in the Super Bowl, but this is still like a 33-year-old journeyman who's bounced around the league. So if I had to nitpick a little bit, I would say the non-Chris Jones pieces on the interior of the defensive line, but that's
and they've gotten away with that forever. Like they've had the same group of interior guys basically for the last 3-4 years for the most part. In Derek Nottie, like Wharton has been there. Obviously they just brought in Pennell, but like it's been mostly the same guys. And so Spags will probably figure it out. I'm not that worried. I'm not concerned about that, but if I'm going to throw out one weakness on the roster, that's probably what I would say.
What are you watching the first month of the season for the Chiefs? We've done this with all the teams that we've talked about. Essentially, like the biggest question, one of the biggest curiosities you have as the season gets kicked off.
I mean, it's what we just talked about with the DBs. I kind of just want to see what levers is Spags going to pull to kind of make this room work because some of the body construction is weird. Like they have Chamari Connor and Trent McDuffie, who are both probably best in the slot, but Connor can also play a little bit of safety. McDuffie can play outside, I think, at a really high level. But then all of their other corners, to me, are true big outside guys. But none of them obviously are going to be as good as L'Jarius Sneed. So I'm kind of just curious to see what Spags is going to do with the construction of it to make it work. On the other hand, I almost think because all the body types that they're replacing Sneed with look just like L'Jarius Sneed, I almost wonder if it doesn't matter. Like they could just do the same stuff, and maybe it's just a little worse because none of them are as good as Sneed. But functionally, they all do the same thing. So I almost wonder if he just is like, we're gonna ride with whatever growing pains that those guys have.
We'll talk about Chamari Connor in a little bit. I think he's an interesting kind of chess piece for this defense overall and some of the things that he can do. I think they assumed that Josh Williams or Jalen Watson, one of those two guys, would just kind of run with that second outside cornerback job when training camp opened and when these guys started getting opportunities to shine. And my understanding, based on reading some of the work that Nate Taylor, who covers the Chiefs for us, has done, is that just hasn't happened. Like the competition hasn't really sorted itself out in the way you might have expected by August 22nd. So there's still question marks there, but I'm kind of with you in the sense that I trust that they'll figure it out. Like whatever group they trot out there, whether it's big nickel looks with Chamari Connor or, one of those two outside guys with Trent McDuffie and somebody else inside, I believe that they will get it sorted out. But I do think that that is a worthwhile question because it's really the only thing we don't know about this defense. Everything else is fairly set at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they're bringing back almost all the other same guys. What, the only other one they lost was Willie Gay, who you mentioned Drew Tranquil. He was playing more and playing pretty well. So, like, it's probably not a huge deal that he's gone.
I don't think it's a big deal at all. I mean, they still have 3 off-ball linebackers that you feel good about. How many teams in the NFL can you say that about right now?
Oh, dude, not very many.
Like them, maybe the Lions. I mean, there aren't that many teams that go 3 deep at that position and feel good about putting those guys on the field at the same time. The Chiefs do. I mean, if you look at the ways they play on defense, it's unlike really any other team in the league. They play a ton of base defense. They play a ton of dime. And it's because they have depth at these spots where other teams are just trying to hunt for 3 starting level players, and the Chiefs have like 4 to 5 that they feel comfortable with.
They have like 8 role players, and somehow they always have the right ones on the field at the right time. It's baffling.
Steve Spagnuolo is very good at his job. What I'm watching the first month of the season, how does the speed manifest in this offense? Because obviously they go out this offseason, they go draft Xavier Worthy in the first round. They go get Hollywood Brown on a 1-year deal. Okay, we got a lot of juice now. Right, you got those guys stepping in essentially in like the McCole Hardman MVS sort of roles, Justin Watson a little bit. I mean, if you look at the snap counts from last year, Justin Watson, MVS, and Sky Moore got a combined 2,000 snaps for this team. So that was a lot. And we think about Rashee Rice, we think about Travis Kelce, but Hollywood and Xavier Worthy coming in, like that really does transform what this room is going to look like because of who the supporting pieces were there last year. But my question is, how is that speed unleashed? Because there is only one way to play against Patrick Mahomes right now. Like there is a Patrick Mahomes defense. It doesn't really matter if it's Tyreek Hill or MVS as like the vertical presence. You're not going to get a lot of single high defense against Patrick Mahomes these days. They're going to make the Chiefs earn it no matter who's out there. So I don't think bringing in Hollywood and Xavier Worthy is necessarily going to mean a bunch of deep shots and just bombs away in the way that it might have in 2018 and the early part of Mahomes' career here. I think this is more about, after talking to somebody there this week, I think it's more about making things a little bit easier on everybody. Because last year, in order to create space underneath, they had to do the craziest possible shit. Like the amount of motions that they were using, the amount of shifts that they were using, the formations that they would have to get in. And the point with these guys is hopefully we can be a little simpler and still affect the defense because teams are so worried about how much speed we have and because of how much space these guys can create. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be a hugely different menu for the Chiefs offensively from what we've seen over the last couple years. I just think getting to their favorite things on that menu will hopefully be a little bit easier because of the pure juice that you've dropped into the formula.
I think that's right. I mean, like you said, they still tried to go vertical a lot last year with MVS and Justin Watson and all that. If Hollywood and to a lesser extent Xavier Worthy can just be a more efficient version of that and give you a little bit more space over the intermediate area, whether that's to Kelsey or Noah Gray or Rashee Rice, whatever, that I think is where you see a lot of the value of this. I'm also really interested to see exactly how they use each guy's speed. Like, I think in some ways, sometimes we just get to like speed is speed and they're going to run down the field. Hollywood to me is more of your actual vertical stretcher.
Yeah.
Xavier Worthy is kind of a horizontal stretcher where I think he's really good on screens, really good taking underneath routes where he can just make a guy miss and boom, there's 15 yards in the blink of an eye. So I'm more curious to see exactly like what the spectrum is for each guy in terms of vertical stretch versus horizontal stretch.
I think that's totally fair. And I think, obviously they're aware that Xavier Worthy is probably going to have trouble with press coverage outside the numbers at
Oh, you think
165
so?
pounds. So I just don't think they're going to ask him to do it very often. This isn't going to be a situation where they're just going to have him run a bunch of go routes against number one corners. I think it is going to be a lot of horizontal across the field. Like that's the way that we're creating stretch within defenses with him specifically, especially early on. So I'm curious to see, like exactly like you mentioned, how are they deployed differently based on kind of the little nuances in their skill set. All right, let's keep going here. For every team, we're kind of doing on the flip side, not what you're looking for, not what you're excited about, but what is keeping you up at night as you think about some of the shortcomings potentially for this year's Chiefs team? This is a hard one to answer.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying you have to view this through the lens of the Chiefs should be winning the Super Bowl. Like that is their goal. So you kind of have to view any holes in their game through that lens. I'm a little bit worried about the offensive line. Not in the sense of like this is going to sink them and they're going to be a bad offense, but just in the sense of how easy, how smooth can this transition to a little bit of a newer offense be? Because last year they did not run the ball well as they did in 2022. The pass protection, especially from the tackles, I do not think was as good as they wanted it to be. So I'm just not 100% sure we're going to get something better from Juwan Taylor. Like, I think he needs to prove it. And then Kingsley Suamataia, I think he's been promising for a rookie. Still a rookie tackle at the end of the day. And that's always a really tough life to live. So I'm just really, that would be my worry of like, is this clearly the best team in the league versus it's a little bit tougher than it needs to be. And maybe they're more like, fourth, fifth through the regular season, that type of thing.
How does the way they played in the playoffs make you think about this, though? Because the fact that we've seen this group, I mean, obviously outside of the left tackle, but the other four pieces kind of take a step from where they were for most of the regular season last year, that makes me a little bit more bullish and a little bit more positive about what this could potentially look like, even with someone new on the left side.
I think that's fair. I think especially, last year, I don't know. It seemed like they were trying a lot more in the run game, and they had already started to do that in 2022, and it was working. And I think in 2023, they couldn't quite find what it was. So I'm kind of hoping there's almost a reverse effect where they realize all of what went wrong in 2023. They kind of fixed that in 2024. Some of the interior guys start to get more pushed than they had used to. Or than they did for most of 2023 and then finally did in the playoffs. So I think that's totally fair. It's just, again, this is a hard team to find a what are you actually scared about with them.
Yes.
And this was just the closest I could get.
Mine is just that it's really hard to win 3 Super Bowls in a row. It's really hard to win 2 Super Bowls in a row. So if there's something that keeps me up at night, I think it's more just the environment they're walking into as a team that's won back-to-back Super Bowls. Not only from I think the idea of you're going to get every team's best every week, like they're the Chiefs. It's Patrick Mahomes. Of course, you're going to get every team's best every single week. I think it's just about the difficulties and how many breaks you have to get all the way back there again. Like they were 6th in adjusted games lost last year. They were relatively healthy for most of the season, even if a couple guys got banged up. Their week 1 starting offensive line last year played 72% of the snaps together, which was the 4th highest rate in the league. So there's something that's going to go wrong. Like maybe they miss a good chunk of time from Kelsey now that he's 34 going on 35. Maybe Chris Jones misses some time. Maybe they get injured along the offensive line and have to start piecing it together a little bit, even though their starting 5 looks good. You can say this about every team, but that's where the Chiefs are. Like, what's keeping me up at night is more so just the idea of how they'll endure bad luck. Because if things go relatively normal for them, there's nothing that I'm particularly worried about.
How good are you when the possibility of random chance is the scariest thing that could happen to your team?
Is that wrong though?
No, it's not. I mean, that's just where we're at with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and the rest of these players. So, I mean, I don't really fault you for going that way.
The lack of certainty in the universe is the thing I'm most
Yes.
worried about with the Chiefs. I think that says a lot about the state of the Chiefs.
We're more certain about Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid than the state and possibilities that could happen within a given universe. I think
What are
that's
you
fair.
most excited about in watching the 2024 Chiefs this season?
I mean, obviously the offense, but we're going to talk about that in 8 million different ways. So I was willing to take a different route. My heart tells me that George Karlaftis is just going to keep getting better because he has only gotten better the longer he's played football.
All right, I want you to explain to people what your infatuation with George Karlaftis is. What is this rooted in?
There are a few things. First of all, I just love these edge rushers who just have like a degree of power and just kind of scrappiness to them. And he is just a guy who, until the whistle blows, he is going to keep going. And I think he's only added to his bag the longer he's been in the league, and really the longer he's played football. Because coming out of college, he was kind of just a bundle of traits and explosive, and you were hoping that he could be more. And I think the longer he's been in the league, he's started to figure out how to make that work for him. The other thing is, I've talked about before how every team, every defense needs a henchman. Karlaftis kind of has that energy to him. Like, he's kind
This
of
team
too
has like
good.
6 henchmen, though.
Yes, no, exact. But that's kind of the thing, is he perfectly exemplifies what the defense is supposed to be. Where I swear to you, there are so few defensive ends in the league who do as good a job of sniffing out screens or getting their hands up to deflect passes at the line of scrimmage as George Karlaftis. And it sounds like a weird thing, but if he can make one of those plays a game, that's a lot. Like, that really starts to add up, especially when you have Spags cooking up 3 or 4 plays that you're going to win automatically, and Chris Jones can do all this stuff. Like, he's just one of those guys where he maybe isn't special at anything, but he's just so good at everything, and it all starts to add up in a way that I think is just so fun to watch.
I wonder how the roles shake out among the edge room over the course of the season. And the reason that I say that is obviously they drafted FAU in the first round last year. Felix Anudike-Uzoma, who they drafted in the first round last year, and he barely played last season, which is what a luxury. Your first round pick is barely playing, and no one even
And you win a
talks
back-to-back
about
Super
it.
Bowl.
Yes. So he did not play much last year. Hopefully he gets more snaps. Charles Omenihu, who tore his ACL late last season or deep into the season, is probably going to be out for a good chunk of the first quarter of the year. So they're not going to be without him for a chunk of the season. Mike Dana, I thought, gave them a ton of really good snaps last year. He's become like quietly like one of my favorite role players in the league to watch. It was fun to see him get paid because I actually do think there's something to his game. So how those 4 kind of shake out and what those roles look like over the course of the year as everybody gets healthy. Again, just a little curiosity about this team that I'm wondering how that all comes together.
I think the funniest part about that room is everyone except for maybe Mike Dana, their little like kind of niche superpower or their weird other thing they're good at is kicking inside. Like
Yes.
Omenihu, Felix Anudike-Uzama, George Karlaftis can play over a guard and beat you. It's just like that's all the thing they're good at. It would be cool if they had one guy who was just really, really fast off the edge, like a Josh Uche, Bryce Huff, whoever. If they had one of those guys, it would be cool. But again, Spags, I'm sure we'll figure it out without it.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be bringing guys from the second level where it doesn't really matter that you don't have as many bendy pass rushers.
Exactly.
What I'm most excited about with this Chiefs team, I really do think that we could just be in line for like a nuclear Patrick Mahomes season. We've hinted at this over like the last few shows, whether it's the top 10s or wins pool draft. There's a lot of attrition with the other really good teams in the AFC. The Ravens have lost pieces this offseason on the offensive line and on defense. The Bengals defense has a lot of question marks. The Bills are in a period of transition. Like, they've lost a lot of guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I'm a little bit worried about their ability to replace those guys. Even if you think this weird experiment in Buffalo with the receivers can work, I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a transition period. The Chiefs are just dropping in guys who are better than the ones they used to have. And this team won the Super Bowl last year. Like, everyone else fucked around and let this team win the Super Bowl when they were like 12th in EPA per dropback. Those days are over. Like, we saw the lowest possible point for a Patrick Mahomes led offense last year. The line wasn't playing well. Nobody could catch the ball. Again, they had to do so many things to create opportunities for their best players. That time is over. I mean, they're back now in a spot where they're operating from a position of strength. And I am very, very excited to watch that version of this offense and that version of this offense with this quarterback, considering what we had to watch for long stretches of last year.
And this feels crazy to say because he's had some incredible statistical seasons before. He's won MVP, all that other stuff. Purely on film, he played better than he's ever played before. Like he, as a decision maker, anticipation, understanding when to get the ball out, he has only gotten better in all of the ways that we've praised. Tom Brady, Philip Rivers, Drew Brees. Like he mentally is becoming that guy, but also he does all of the insane stuff that Aaron Rodgers has done or that Josh Allen can do as a thrower. Like he has perfectly hit the 100% mark on both. He's just the best to ever do it, man. He's unbelievable.
I think that is a very good observation. And again, talking to people about what this training camp has felt like there, this is the best he has ever been. And I know that may sound silly and may sound like something you say in August, but for the exact reason that you just mentioned, the mental side and the physical side, the convergence of those two is now complete. And I think we got flashes of that 2 years ago when he won the MVP, and at times last year when the supporting cast wasn't able to properly meet him as it was happening. But now apparently in practice, like he's just chuckling as he gets fooled by pressures and then just backpedaling a little bit and completing like 25-yard chunk plays because he's seeing the matrix. Like that's where we are right now. And the idea that he could be better this year than we've ever seen him be, and they have the requisite talent to make the most of that, it's horrifying. Just think about the prospect of that if you are another team in the AFC.
That's the thing. What This isn't going to end anytime soon. He is not an old player. He's like what, 28 maybe by now. This is still coming for at least like 8 more years, dude. Like this, it's not coming to an end anytime soon.
It's funny because I've talked to multiple different quarterbacks who are deeper into their careers now over the last few weeks. Jared Goff, Sam Darnold, guys who are 28, 29, and just the difference in how you see and understand football when you get to that stage. Most quarterbacks get better when they get to that age. And that's how old Patrick Mahomes is. His peak started when he was like 23, 24 in a way we don't typically see at the position. And I think that it's given us a warped understanding of what his trajectory and development plan might look like. And that's why I think people may not necessarily be ready for what type of product he is going to put on the field this year.
Yep.
Most important supporting character in your mind for this year's Chiefs team?
I have 2. I have one on each side of the ball. Kingsley Suamataia is where I'm going to start with the offense. Last year, they did not get, I think, the play that they wanted out of Donovan Smith. I think he was supposed to be a little bit of a stopgap for them, and I think it could have gone better. I think both tackles could have played better.
He was fine. Right. It wasn't a disaster, but he was not as good as he had been for stretches when he was with the Bucs. And obviously that's why he was available last offseason for very little and deep into the offseason.
Right. I think that was the bet they made. It's like we can hope he can be as good as he was with the Bucs, and then he wasn't quite as good as that. And again, with a guy as old as he is, who's been playing as long as he has, it totally makes sense that was going to happen. Kingsley Suamataia, I think if he can come in immediately and be a moderate upgrade over that. I mean, even 2, 3, 5% and really give them some help in the run game. I think that would be absolutely massive for them because the run game was really, I think, where they had a lot of their issues last year. I know the receiving core was also a huge issue, but the run game was just not as good as it had been in 2022. So if he could come in and do that, that would be awesome. On the other side of the ball, Drew Tranquill did play well last year. But I am curious about what it's going to look like if he is stepping into like more of a full-time role, because as good as I think he is in coverage, he is not the player in the box that Willie Gay is. And he's not the type of run defender, not the type of guy who can take on blocks. And so I am curious to see if him stepping into more of a full-time role ends up being a question mark, or on the flip side, if they just kind of slot Leo Chenal into what Willie Gay was doing, where he's playing a little bit more on base downs and they just let him do that. So
yeah, that's very possible, right? Like, I mean, that fits his skill set. And that kind of is connected to how I'm thinking about the most important supporting character. Suamataia I think has to be mentioned here. But unlike the Tyron Smith to Tyler Guyton thing in Dallas, it's reasonable to assume that even as a second round pick, he can be an upgrade on what you were getting at left tackle last year. The other guy I wanted to mention is Chamari Connor. And it's for this reason. If we have some questions about what the other outside corner spot is going to look like, I think that there's a chance we land in a place where the Chiefs' 11 best defensive players exist of a DB room that is Trent McDuffie in one outside cornerback spot, whoever the other outside cornerback spot, Chamari Connor as a big nickel, and then you have the safeties. You have Justin Reed and Brian Cook back there, and even Jaden Hicks, their 4th round pick, has apparently looked really good in training camp. So they have a lot of depth at safety. So can they weaponize that as they figure out some of the questions that they have at linebacker? And if they're playing that way, does it maybe alleviate some of the questions about that third linebacker spot that we're talking about? So I wonder like what sort of kind of flexible piece Connor is for like the way that they want to play this year.
I think if he can really like turn it up a notch as a player from the slot and really be that type of guy, that would go a long way for them to kind of unlock McDuffie to play on the outside. Obviously, McDuffie's incredible inside, but if both of those guys can basically hit on those full-time roles, huge win for this defense.
What counts as a successful season for the Chiefs this year?
I mean, it sounds silly because you said doing 3-peat is hard, but like, do it again. Like, what else is that? You're Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Do it again.
I don't think they have to win the Super Bowl for you to consider it a success, but I think they probably think they have to win the Super Bowl for it to be considered a success. So I'm just going to roll with that. For each of these teams, go ahead.
I think it has. So I think I have to say that is the level. That's the bar for success, but they're so good and that's so unattainable that if they don't hit it, I'm not going to be like, failed season. It's just when you're this good and you have this quarterback, that is the goal every single time.
I think that's what it should be. Irresponsible player prediction for the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, we're doing one of these for every single team as we do these previews.
I think we get career highs for Isaiah Pacheco across the board. And there's a few reasons that I believe this. One, I don't think the run game can be as bad as it was last year, just in terms of the blocking. I think you saw from the interior, especially the guards, that they played just a little bit below their level and weren't getting the same push that I think that we are used to seeing from them. If we can assume any degree of upgrade at the left tackle with Kingsley Suamataia, I think that could help the run game. I also just think having some of the speed that they have now with guys like Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, kind of is going to force defenses a little bit more to be wary of deep passing and stuff, and that should unlock the run boxes. So I kind of think we just get career highs for Isaiah Pacheco across the board, which doesn't actually have to be anything crazy. It would basically be like over 1,000 yards, over I think 9 touchdowns. So it's not anything insane, but I think we get there with him.
I also think they just don't want to give the ball to anybody else. We're talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like
I didn't want to say that,
who we kind of think is a fullback wearing number 42, is like getting carries for this team in the preseason. So I think him getting a vast majority of the work also contributes to that. Mine is kind of a Patrick Mahomes prediction couched as a Rashee Rice prediction. If Rashee Rice plays all the games, I think he could like lead the NFL in touchdown catches this year. There's going to be a lot of them to go around. And if they're going to be slow playing Travis Kelce for a good chunk of the season, it feels like Rashee Rice just might have that like monster year in this offense.
Absolutely. I mean, he's probably their best red zone weapon. While Travis Kelce is on the pitch count, he's probably their best red zone weapon.